Imagine yourself cruising down the street on your bicycle. Suddenly you spot a squirrel darting across the road. You slam on the brakes and your bike screeches to a halt. What made this sudden stop possible? The answer, my friends, is friction. Friction is a force that opposes motion when two surfaces rub against each other. It's everywhere, and it plays a crucial role in our daily lives. Without friction, we couldn't walk, drive, or even hold a pencil. Remember that time you tried to run across a slippery, icy sidewalk? Yeah, that's friction, or the lack thereof, at play. Friction is a fascinating force that keeps our world from being a chaotic, slippery mess. Let's dive in and explore the science behind it. Friction is all about the interaction between surfaces. It's a force that opposes motion, making it harder for objects to slide past each other. When two surfaces try to slide past each other, friction kicks in to resist that motion. This resistance can vary depending on several factors, but what determines how strong this frictional force is? Why do some surfaces slide easily while others don't? Well, it depends on two main factors: the nature of the surfaces and the force pressing them together. First, the types of surfaces involved. Different materials have different levels of roughness and texture. Think about it. It's much easier to slide a hockey puck across smooth ice than it is to push a heavy box across a carpeted floor. The smoother the surface, the less friction there is. Rougher surfaces create more friction. This is because the tiny bumps and grooves on rough surfaces catch on each other. Second, the force pressing the surfaces together. The greater the force, the more the surfaces are pressed into each other. The harder you press two surfaces together, the more friction there will be. This is why heavier objects experience more friction. That's why it takes more force to push a heavy box than a lighter one. The weight increases the force pressing the surfaces together. Understanding these factors helps us predict and control friction in various situations. Whether it's in engineering, sports, or everyday tasks, knowing how friction works is crucial. Now, let's explore the two main types of friction: static friction and kinetic friction, each playing a unique role in our daily lives. Imagine a heavy box resting on the floor. It looks like it should be easy to move, right? You try to push it, but it won't budge. No matter how hard you push, it stays put. What's keeping it stuck? The answer is static friction. This invisible force is stronger than you might think. Static friction is the force that prevents an object from moving when a force is applied to it. It acts as a barrier to motion. It's the force that keeps your furniture from sliding around when you bump into it, ensuring stability in your home, and the force that allows you to grip a doorknob. Without it, simple tasks would be much harder. Think of it like this: the surfaces of the box and the floor have microscopic bumps and grooves. These tiny imperfections play a big role. When at rest, these bumps and grooves interlock, creating a strong bond that resists motion. This interlocking is what makes it so hard to move the box. The key thing to remember about static friction is that it acts in the opposite direction of the applied force, preventing motion. It's always there, working against you. But there's a limit to how much force static friction can withstand. Once you exceed this limit, the object will start to move. Now, let's say you push that box a bit harder, and finally it starts to move. This is where kinetic friction comes into play, as it only acts when objects are in motion. As the box slides across the floor, it's kinetic friction that's at play. This force is what resists the motion of the box as it glides over the surface. Kinetic friction is the force that opposes the motion of two surfaces sliding against each other. It acts in the opposite direction to the movement, trying to slow it down. It's always less than the maximum force of static friction, which is why it's easier to keep an object moving than it is to start it moving. Once the object is in motion, maintaining that motion requires less effort. When the box is sliding, those microscopic bumps and grooves are no longer fully interlocked. Instead, they are partially separated, reducing the resistance. They're constantly colliding and slipping past each other, creating friction that opposes the box's motion. This interaction generates heat and sometimes even sound. Kinetic friction depends on the same factors as static friction: the types of surfaces and the force pressing them together. The rougher the surfaces, the greater the friction. But as we've learned, the force of kinetic friction is always less than the maximum force of static friction. This fundamental difference is crucial in understanding how objects move.